Hello, everyone. This is Lee Andrews with Akathame for another Live with Lee, and today it is with Aquent Gymnasium's leadership team, which is Jeremy Osborne and Andrew Miller, who are going to introduce themselves. You might be familiar with Jeremy because he interviewed one of our UX researchers many moons ago when we first started Live with Lee. But we're going to get right into this because it's a hot discussion. This is going to be about MOOCs, about learning experience design, about the future UX role. So we've got a lot to cover. Let's get right to it. So, Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself real quick because the audience probably hasn't met you yet?
Sure. So I'm Andrew Miller, and I'll make it really quick. I'm the program director for Aquent Gymnasium, which is an online learning experience teaching skills to designers and developers and other digital creatives. And my background is in design, and yeah, that's me.
Yeah, not just design. You worked in the Pentagon as a UX?
Well, I worked for Microsoft, and I worked for another company called Sapient, and both of those, I designed stuff that was for public safety, for healthcare, and so forth. So I was in the Pentagon, although it turns out you can't check in on Facebook when you're in the Pentagon. There's no GPS there. It's amazing. I don't know how they do it. They also have really big guns there to convince you not to.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that space. And Jeremy, real quick, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, I'm the academic director of Aquent Gymnasium, and so I've got a background in teaching and design and development, writing books, all sorts of stuff. And for the most part, since 2013, I've kind of been responsible for producing most of the courses and all the related material, particularly video, but other areas as well for Gymnasium.
Terrific. Thank you both so very much for joining me here today. So I informed you about what we're doing with Design for Humanity, and we've got a bunch of learning experts in that group. So let's see what we can share for them. First question is, Jeremy, or probably Andrew, because I think, Andrew, you kicked this off. How long has a gymnasium been around, and how many learners do you have accessing that MOOC?
So the gymnasium launched in 2013. Jeremy actually predated me on the project by a couple of months. And so since then, we've had over 110,000 registered students, which it's overwhelming. It's amazing. In any span of about 30 days, we've got anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 active students on the site. Yeah, it's a whole lot of grading.
That's great. That's crazy. That's great. And so, so when we talk about the impact of what kind of impact should these learners expect? Like, what kind of things are they learning, and can they apply? How quickly can they apply it to their jobs?
Well, I'll let Jeremy sort of address the content side of it. But at the highest level, like, our goal is to produce the most practical, useful content. So, obviously it's online learning, so things tend to be more concrete than abstract in terms of skills that you can apply. But we have some great anecdotal evidence whenever we meet with students. We hear we have lots of clients who share with us their success stories, and so we've met a lot of people who've joined UX teams, for example, having taken some of our UX training and using that credential as justification to be moved from a sort of a more general design role to working on UX teams. And so I would say that it's helpful for incremental movements. And I think we've seen the biggest ones in the sense of organizations that have a very old-fashioned way of thinking about design, that they have say a print design team that's separate from the web design team. And designers have been able to move from the old world to the new world by taking some of our classes and using the credential as justification, or that their managers see the credential as a justification to take them on.
Right.
And so from general design, digital design into UX, and also from print design into web design.
That's great. Jeremy, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just it's probably worth taking a step back and just kind of saying, the courses that we tend to feature are in the domain of things like web design and development, UX, content strategy, JavaScript, and then we kind of branch out a little bit into things like career skills. So again, time management or how to develop a portfolio and things like that. And again, for the most part, our audience are folks who are professionals already. We leave the beginner audience to folks like, LinkedIn Learning, or other folks like that who, again, have this huge scope of courses and curriculum that not only can we not compete with them, we kind of don't want to. We just say, okay, we actually have a limited kind of resources. We really want to make sure that the courses that we offer are going to help level someone up. And that person should be someone who has a foundation in some of those topics that I mentioned. Okay. So that's kind of our goal.
So you've trained over 100,000 people, and you are working, because I'm not sure that everybody understands that Aquent Gymnasium is part of the Aquent brand, and there's a big staffing component to it. So what are you seeing in terms of UX roles? What's going to happen with the UX? I mean, we also see homogenization across the UX function, right? So what's going to happen to these roles, and what are you training these people to be mindful of, and in terms of skills and just, thinking about UX?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, UX is such a, we've been kind of fascinated with the development of UX for the last, for quite a while, but specifically the last 2 years. And we've really been trying to investigate and figure out, like, what do organizations want and what is lacking. And so we know that there was kind of a gold rush, right? You had all of these companies, these large Fortune 500 companies suddenly realized, UX design deserves a seat at the table. And so let's invite the folks in. And that's all great. It's excellent news. And in a way, though, what that demand, it's a typical supply demand issue, right? So you've got this huge demand for folks who are skilled in user experience and understanding what that's like. So then you also have folks who essentially want to give it a try. They're like, hey, this UX stuff doesn't sound too hard. Like, I'm just going to jump in. And then there's boot camps, right? So UX boot camps is this hot topic of can we upskill someone who has a basic level of digital knowledge to become a UX designer? And the short answer is no. You can't.
Wow.
I mean, you can try, but and for certain things you can.
Those are big words, Jeremy. You've just put a dart in the boot camp bubble.
Yeah, well,
and those boot camps can cost up to $60,000. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, or they'll take a certain percentage of your salary, and you don't have to pay a thing, because of course you're going to get that huge job, and then you can, pay them back. And again, I'm not, I think that the main issue here is that the skills that you get in, whether it's our courses, and I'm not separating ourselves from boot camps all that drastically. The truth is there's a limit to what people can learn unless they're doing the work. And that sounds obvious, right? But at the same time, for UX, I think we've discovered, and Andrew can talk about this for sure, because, he has, a little bit more background than actually the practice of UX design than I do. But there's a certain level of experience that cannot be replaced.
And so what do you think is specifically happening? Andrew, maybe you can speak to this. How is the function of UX changing, and how are the roles within UX changing?
Well, I think it's worth just considering sort of a micro and macro sort of look at UX as a field. UX to me is kind of it's like saying science, like I work in science, right? And it's like, well, you're going to need to be a bit more specific because science is pretty big, right? So I think before UX, it was human factors, and it was usability with people in white lab coats and a very monolithic view of how software and humans interact. And the web changed absolutely every single part of that. And so I think that since, I'm sure that it was before the web, the field of UX has been expanding and contracting. And the number of roles, the different groups that are considered UX and not considered UX have sort of expanded and contracted along with it. I worked at a place where there were, on any single project, there were 8 specific types of UX designers. It made no sense to me at all. But there were people who were so specialized that it was ridiculous. On the other hand, this idea of a single UX generalist who can do everything in the realm of user experience design, from the business analysis to the interface design, makes also less sense. And then the idea that a UX researcher and a UX designer can be one and the same, maybe they can, but I think you end up making major compromises. So that being said, I think the concrete tool skills that you can learn easily online or in a boot camp, the sort of mechanical tasks of putting together a wireframe, for example, or how to use a particular prototyping tool, those are concrete skills. You can learn those watching a tutorial. We've got a lot of them. That is the idea of the leveling up, right? You can already do the user analysis. You can already do the user research. Here's a cool facilitation technique that you may not have heard about or used before, and here's something that you can use it for. So like that sort of incremental learning of very concrete things is absolutely doable from training, and you can get those skills if you want to pay for them or if you want to do them for free. I think the more abstract, the more nuanced, the more the things that fall under critical thinking or developing one's empathy skills. Those are things that are difficult to just learn, say, out of a book. It requires practice and it requires mentorship. Mm-hmm. And so there are lots of tricks you can do to sort of accelerate your learning on those fronts. Things like, Lee, you were a teacher, right? So you could read a book about pedagogy, and it's meaningless until you have to put together a lesson plan.
That's right.
And then when you put that lesson plan into operation and you actually present it to a class, you get a sense of like, are they loving it? Are they hating it? Are they getting it? And then you need to be able to assess the efficacy of that training, right? But how do you do this if you're doing it without student teaching, for example? How do you do this without a mentor who's sitting in the back of the room, and at the end of the class, they come to you and say, Lee, you should have done this more, you should have done that more, and you didn't notice the person in the back who was sleeping, right? And so you could set up a video recorder and capture the video of you doing it and watch it. But if you don't have the critical eye to watch for what you're doing wrong, the only thing you can think is like, wow, my voice sounds really funny, right? I mean, that's a useful thing to know, but right. So I think that the things that, that idea of being able to put it into practice and get feedback, that learning on the job, there's a whole lot of that is critical for UX design. Otherwise, you have a lot of people who are just being pedantic, supposed advocates for the end user. So, and not understanding what the bigger picture is, or not recognizing the things that they're missing out.
So just like any topic, you need to learn how to apply the theory, period.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, so, the thing like role. So I was thinking about this, in boot camps, quite often there'll be like role play, where it'd be one of the students was like, oh, so you be the business owner and you be the UX interviewer and try and get to the bottom of what the user problems might be. And it's like in role play, and Jeremy and I do this quite often, like, for various purposes, like the role playing is, it's a really good way to demonstrate an idea, but you always end up being this caricaturish version of the roles, and it's not really very real at all, no matter how hard you try.
Right.
And, there are some boot camps that have the students attending real work, and they have mentors in the industry who are doing something like an internship and so on. And that kind of stuff is definitely a step towards like the more holistic sort of training and the feedback cycle that's necessary for developing UX practitioners.
So I just want to let the audience know, for some reason, the comments are not coming through. They're not posting. So for those of you who are listening to the recording, you might have to rewind and hear the original question. So in terms of the roles, do you see more homogenization happening to reduce cost? Or do you see more specializations happening? Because now we've got this whole learning experience design function that's coming into play. So let's talk about that. So starting with yes or no, do you think that roles are going to homogenize even more, blend into multiple skills in one role?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. All right.
I think both are going to happen in many ways. I think, like to Andrew's point, I think that the field of, again, UX, however you want to define it, is so large now, and this is again the learning. So this, learning experience design. Okay, so the idea of, and there was an evolution of an instructional design. That's kind of was my bread and butter, 15, 20 years ago, which was very relatively cut and dry. It's like, okay, here's the thing you need to teach. How are you teaching it? Well, I'm doing it via, either video, or doing it in person, or I'm creating a book or whatever. And so now we've got this component of online, right? And so once everything is online, which kind of feels like everything is right now, then all of a sudden there's all of these other pieces that fit into the puzzle. Even if you want to take a look at something as cut and dry, as like teaching via Zoom or video conference, like holy cow, all of a sudden there's all of these things that you need to consider that you would never think of in a classroom setting, for example. So that's kind of part of this experience design. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's if UX is about sweating the details, right? Which, that's one definition of it, is like paying attention to how users interact. It would be the exact same thing with learning these days. When you're learning virtually, there's all of these things that you have to take into consideration. And it's everything, right? Just as UX, it was defined as like, well, everything counts in UX design. If your connection is slow and the user is having a bad experience, like on your app, like they don't really care that there's a bad connection. They care that your app is slow. And so it's the same thing with learning experience. It's like, well, are there ways to mitigate things like, again, lighting, sound, the ability to like raise your hand if you're in a group of folks, who gets to talk, who doesn't, like all of these things are now just as important as like, okay, are you going to be comfortable in your chair for 3 hours?
Boy, this is amazing to me, to go from classroom to this online. I mean, it's nothing new. Teaching online is nothing new. We used to do it on conference calls all the time. And it's only been since Zoom and Google Hangout and a few others that this has transpired. So it looks like we've got a question here. It says, I find that options, this is from Ellen, I find that options to do student teaching in UX research and design is lacking. What can be done to increase these opportunities for people pivoting into UX and new graduates?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that it's I guess it depends on who is doing the doing, who is going to be encouraging people to be good mentors, to build, to sort of teach their teammates how to do these things. So my own personal experience in UX research was that while I've had graduate training in sort of ethnographic research and cognitive science research, I hadn't done it for a consulting company with a client and with end users and all of that ever until the first time I ever saw it being done. And so purely from an observational standpoint, and luckily for me, there was somebody who was leading the research who said, you should watch so that you can help out. And so even if I were at the time was the gopher helping put plug cables for video cameras in or anything like that. I got to watch from the front, and I saw exactly how it went down, and I watched the results, and I saw the presentation to the executives, and I got a sense of exactly how that happened. Had I not been given that opportunity, it might have taken me longer to get to the point where I could run a user research session with any amount of confidence or with any sort of like real skill. And the same, so I think agencies and organizations that have UX research folks should make sure to try and get as many people to help out as possible, because the more people who have that amount of skill, the better the results can ultimately be, the more testing you can do. A lot of user research testing is grunt work. It's kind of miserable. If you do card sorting in person with physical cards, someone's got to tabulate the results. Until you've done that, you have no idea what card sorts are all about. You can do it digitally, certainly, to do massive scale card sorting, for example, but you need an organization that's going to encourage and actually sort of remunerate people for giving opportunities and helping build those roles.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I would just add to that, again, back to that question of what can be done to increase the opportunities. Well, again, I think there is, to Andrew's point, there's kind of a responsibility for organizations to, they have to be a little patient, right? They need to put folks in those scenarios, and I think some organizations probably, again, it's a tricky situation, right? Because most organizations want a new employee to be up and running as fast as possible, ideally, right? You turn around and you here's the person, they can do the thing. And yeah, sure, they'll learn about our business on the fly. And again, if we're seeing time and time that folks who are getting into UX need that practice. They need the ability and the experience of walking into a room and having to pitch an idea and to sell it. And that's a very that's a scary scenario for a lot of people. If you haven't been there, you can practice it all you want, but until you have that first experience of walking into a client who needs to be convinced, it's just, so I think companies have to build that in. And they may be a little reticent to do that because they're not making money right away.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually tack onto that as well. I think that it's up to the students to make a good choice in the school. Mm-hmm. They have to do their research. If you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on a degree, and it is in that curriculum doesn't include what I went through, student teaching or practical experience, that means that these schools, whether they are colleges or boot camps or whatever, they should be aligned with employers to where these people are getting hands-on work, can build their portfolios before they graduate. To me, that makes all the difference in the program. It's what you guys are saying, that with just the theory on a piece of paper, it becomes more difficult. The other thing is that I think that we need more mentors. And I think that as people get so bogged down in their careers, they forget where they came from. Mm-hmm. Today, with the COVID outbreak, we've got tens of thousands of people volunteering to mentor other people, which to me was one of the best parts of having to be in this house, right? Is that I could actually reach out to people who are far more talented than me and start learning from them, and they're doing it free of charge. So I think that there's two sides of the coin. Schools need to do better. Boot camps need to do much, much better. And we need better informed buyers of these of education, meaning the consumer has to be better educated. So let's go on to this next question. And we've got about 6 minutes left, 5.5 minutes left. I want to make sure nobody else had any other questions. Nothing seems to be coming in. I want to talk about mobile learning. So Design for Humanity is doing nothing but these, and then you guys are doing take fives, right? These are online. They take 5 minutes to do. Mobile learning through EdApp is 5 minutes, and they're in segments doing exactly the same thing. I've seen learning modules, and I've created them in 1 minute. segments, those are hard to create.
Yep.
How effective are they? And then, Jeremy, you and I had these mobile email texts on learning, right?
Yep.
If we keep cutting this down, right? Time is of the essence for everything. How effective is this micro learning? How effective do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, I think that's easily a topic in itself, but for sure, I think that the reason that it's compelling to folks. So, the reason that, well, I'll say two things. One, the reason that we started looking at the Take 5 format, really, I mean, there's a number of reasons, but it really kind of comes down to people are busy, right? And the shortcuts that training involves is kind of why people do that. I used to do kind of old school training where we'd have 2-day workshops. And the point there is like, we'll teach you how to use Photoshop in 2 days and get up and running, versus the 3 weeks it's going to take you to do it on your own and probably go down the wrong path. So the Take 5 stuff is a little bit like that. Like, let's find one thing that you can do right now to improve something, whether it's web design, development, or your career skills. So it's the focus, I think, more than anything else. Get rid of all the distractions and put the blinders on, and then show me what I need to do.
This is task by task training.
Exactly. And I think the second part, though, like in terms of like specifically mobile, and again, I've done some work with the folks at a company called Arist, ARIST.co, and these folks are doing text message courses, and those started off for a number of reasons. We actually did a pilot within Aquent where we essentially decided, okay, it's very similar. We want to train recruiters, in this case, how to ask good questions of web designers and developers, even if they don't know the technology. Because that's a common problem, right? It's like, as a former, recruiter yourself, I'm sure you had many conversations where you're sitting there talking to someone and they're like, yeah, anyway, so when I go into Node and this, and you're like, like, are you telling the truth or are you just making words up? So there's the mobile piece, though, is like this delivered piece of instruction that is super focused. It shows up on your phone. It comes in the form of a text message, and you're used to that occupying your attention for a minute, maybe, if you're lucky, right? So I think it's a fascinating development, and I know there's a lot of organizations who are, and again, it sounds like EdApp is one of those folks who are like, actually, targeted, focused instruction is kind of the way to go.
Yeah. We're taking on some big topics there. So, Andrew, in about a minute is what we have left. Can you just tell us what are your thoughts on the move towards mobile and like 1 minute training, those kind of things?
Yeah, I think the just-in-time training and the super focused delivery of something is really cool. I think it lends itself really well to certain types of learning, but not all. I think the reason it seems so odd to us, though, and why it's worth a smirk or two, is just because we have an old way of thinking about what learning should look like anyway. The first MOOCs were basically video recordings of lectures in lecture halls. And you know that this is not a way that you can actually teach a course online. You can't just simply play the video recording of what you did in person with a live audience in a classroom where people were paying huge amounts of money and forced to sit. And now you've got an audience with liquid expectations. They expect every e-commerce experience to be just like Amazon. They're expecting everything to be engaging, wonderful, super fast, not requiring a plugin, to work seamlessly on every device, even the ones that you haven't even designed for. It's all true. I mean, that's what people expect. That's what they get. There's no reason to deny that. As it turns out, online learning is not like learning in a classroom, and you can't simply teach the way that you were teaching in a classroom and put it online. And so, micro-learning existed before online learning. And the way that micro-learning is being operationalized now in online learning is taking these different forms of super short format video or texts, I don't know. I'm not riding the subway these days, so I don't sit looking at my phone, looking to be amused. So the idea of like a text message teaching me something is less appealing, but one day it will be again.
Interesting. Gentlemen, I can't believe it, but 30 minutes are up. I want to, went by fast, didn't it?
Good.
So I want to thank you both again for joining us today. If people want to get a hold of you, Aquent Gymnasium, you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn, you're all over the place, so they can reach out and connect with you directly. Thanks to everybody who joined us today. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Andrew, Jeremy, or myself. And everybody have a fantastic day. If my speakers would just hold on for just a second. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.